This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast presented by ItaliancitizenshipAssistance.com. I am here with Marco Permunian, the head of the U.S. Office of Italian Citizenship Assistance and Italian attorney. And I am Rafael Di Furia. And today we are back to answer some more frequently asked questions. More, I should say, actually, Marco is here to answer some frequently asked questions. And of course, if you have any questions about any of the subjects we've spoken about in this video, feel free to leave that down in the comment section below, or even if they're completely unrelated and just a question about Italian citizenship, feel free to leave that there as well, or to use the ItaliancitizenshipAssistance.com contact form, and let's just get straight into the video. The first commonly asked question is, what is the AIRE?
The AIRE is the registry of the Italian citizens residing abroad. It stands for Anagrafe degli Italiani Residenti all'estero. And it is a registry which was created in the late 80s. The system is in place because Italians residing abroad have to let the Italian government know about their residency. But the purpose of the AIRE is not just letting the Italian government know where you reside abroad, but it also allows you to use the Italian consulate services. So if you have, for example, to renew your Italian passport, and if you reside abroad, unless it's an emergency, you have to be registered with the AIRE to be able to renew your Italian passport. Also, another duty of an Italian citizen residing abroad is to register their own personal vital records. So people residing abroad who are properly registered with the AIRE should let the Italian government know about any major life events. So if you have a child, you have to register the birth certificate of the child, which is also how the child becomes an Italian citizen. Or if you get married, you have to register your marriage record. Or if you get divorced, you have to register your judgment of divorce with the consulate, which will then take care of transferring your vital record documents to the Italian municipality, because the AIRE is a registry held jointly by the Italian consulate and your Italian municipality of last residency in Italy. So if you were residing in Italy prior to moving to the US, then the registry will be held jointly by your local Italian consulate and the municipality where you were residing prior to moving to the US. But if, for instance, you became an Italian citizen by descent, so you never potentially lived in Italy and you just became an Italian citizen from within the US, then you're registered with the AIRE registry held by the Italian municipality where your Italian ancestor was born.
Interesting. Anyway, to move on to the next frequently asked questions, what about requesting documents from Italy? I know that can be quite involved and a little tricky for someone who's not familiar with the system.
Of course, when you're applying for citizenship by descent, you not only need to present documents that are in the US, but also documents coming from Italy. For instance, you need to have your Italian ancestor's birth certificate, or if also his wife was born in Italy, if you're applying through your male ancestor, you also need to have, depending on the consulate that you're using, her birth certificate. And if they got married in Italy, you also need their marriage record. So how do you go about requesting these documents from Italy? And the answer is sometimes it can be a little bit tricky or complex, mainly because the municipalities in Italy can be not cooperative. So if you're lucky enough, you'll find a municipality in Italy that will be able to assist you quickly and in an efficient manner. But if you're unlucky, you may end up having to deal with a municipality that is not that efficient. And in that case, you may have to wait a long time for your certificate to be released, or you may have to follow up several times. But let's get into the question that people really are asking: how do I go about getting this document. And if you are not using a person who is located in Italy, like a family member or a friend or a service provider such as Italian Citizenship Assistance, you will have to send a written request to the municipality by mail. And my suggestion would be to use maybe FedEx or DHL, like a reliable shipping method. And then if you're lucky enough, the municipality will just mail you back the actual document that you need. It would be probably advisable to include a pre-stamped envelope for them to be able to mail back the document to you easily. I've heard, though, very horrible stories about people having waited for months for their documents to come in the mail, having heard nothing from the comune, and finally they had to hire someone to get the certificate in question, because the comune can be very uncooperative, especially with people residing abroad, especially with people who don't speak Italian fluently.
And one thing also just for many people to keep in mind is that if you're sending a self-addressed, stamped envelope, to keep in mind that the stamps from your country won't be valid in Italy. So you would need to also organize the stamps from Italy as well. But what I have heard some people have done, don't just send a 10 euro bill or something like that. I've heard of people doing this, and I've heard Marco and his company are not advising you to do this, but it might be worthwhile to contact them ahead of time, if at all possible, and ask them what they would prefer you do in that situation. But anyway, I think it would be good to move on to the next question of what is an apostille and how do I get it?
An apostille is a certification of your vital record document pursuant to the Hague Convention. Basically, according to this international convention, you can use a document issued in a country which is a signatory of this convention in another country. You need to have a document called apostille. The apostille is issued in the country where the document originates, and it's physically attached to your document, and the purpose is proving that the person who signed the document was acting in his legal capacity. So the actual apostille will say who the person who signed the document is and in what capacity this person signed the document. So it's basically a certification of the signature of the person who signed the document. Once you have the apostille, you can legally use your document issued abroad. So, for instance, in the US, in Italy, or at the Italian consulate.
And moving on to the next frequently asked question. If someone wants to apply in Italy, for example, and what can be the case very often is that the process might take more than 90 days. But if they're not an Italian citizen, how can they stay in the country during the remainder of the process?
The law allows you to enter the country as a tourist with the purpose of applying for Italian citizenship by descent. And if the process takes less than 90 days, then there is nothing else you have to do. But if you realize that the process is taking longer than 90 days, before the 90 days pass, you have to apply for a residency permit, a permission of stay, which will allow you to continue residing in Italy throughout the citizenship process. So until the citizenship process ends, there is a specific residency permit for people who applied for citizenship in Italy, which is called Permesso di soggiorno in attesa di cittadinanza.
Again, I keep saying this every time. I sound like a broken record, but that should be the citizenship test right there, if you can pronounce that phrase.
So once you get this residency permit, you are legally allowed to continue residing in Italy for the duration of the citizenship process.
Mm-hmm. So really, it allows you just to be here without really any limitations other than that you're not able to work in the country during that time period.
Correct.
And moving on to the final question for this episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast. In lieu of birth records. Like if you can't get it from your municipality, your state, whatever it may be, can you use church records, like baptismal records instead?
Very interesting question, because there are a lot of people in this situation. So if you cannot, for whatever reason, get the birth certificate of your ancestor, can you use a church record? And the answer is it depends, not always. So you can use a church record only if when your ancestor was born in Italy, there were no birth registries at all, meaning birth registries had not yet been created. In that case, churches were legally allowed to keep registries with legal value. So in that case, you could use a certificate of baptism to apply for Italian citizenship, along with a statement from the comune saying that they didn't have registries yet in those years. But if instead the comune doesn't have a birth certificate for your ancestor because the birth of your ancestor was never registered, or because the registries for those years were destroyed, in that case you cannot use a church record in lieu of a birth certificate.
Anyway, we have reached the end of our list of frequently asked questions for this time, but don't worry, we have plenty more of them in the future. And of course, if you have any questions that you would like answered, potentially to come up in this podcast, feel free to leave that down in the comment section below, or to use the Italiancitizenshipassistance.com email form, where you can ask questions in a little bit more privacy. Just be sure, if you don't want your name included, to let them know about that. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast. We've had a great time with you again, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Later. See ya.
Ciao.